I'm Rochelle Wilhite. I'm the designated broker of Best Choice Realty, and we are going to be discussing buyer agency tonight, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I've got some fun ones to talk about tonight. This is near and dear to my heart right now. I am encountering a lot of buyer agency issues, not only with our own agents at our firm, but also with other brokers from other companies not understanding how the agency process works, specifically in the state of Washington. And I don't think we can train this enough. I think many brokers and brokerages need to spend some time in educating their agents about agency and when is it established and when do you do it, how do you do it, and what is the legalities around buyer agency, and specifically in the state of Washington. So we're going to cover that tonight. It's a 30-minute session for sure. I'm going to cover the good. So if you're on early, I guess you're going to hear the good. But if you dialed in late or towards the end of the session tonight, we'll talk about the ugly. And hopefully you guys won't make the ugly mistakes of not having an agency agreement, because it can be really ugly. So we'll go to that point. If you have questions or unique situations on your own that you'd like me to look into, I have been getting phone calls. I get about a phone call a day lately about buyer agency. So shoot me a quick text or let Shannon know, or message somebody in the chat if you have a specific issue that you want to go over or you want me to cover. Let's go ahead and get into it, Shannon. So an agency agreement, in essence, is an agreement, much like a listing agreement, where you've established a written agreement with your buyer. The buyer agency agreement is with the firm. It's actually with the company you work with. And that agency agreement is available, formatted, ready to go, either on the transaction desk. It's also in our website. And if you ever needed to modify it or adjust it in any way, you could call me or text me, and I'd be happy to give you a specific buyer agency agreement that has been approved by our attorney. But to start off the call, just want to start off with a good example. This was actually an example that I had a couple years ago with a buyer who was recommended from my brother. My brother had game nights with him. His name was Alex, and he sent me this email. So this is kind of how it starts, is a relationship. Hopefully it's a friend. Hopefully it's somebody you know, because sometimes those are the best situations. But even if it is a friend, there's a reason why we put agency in place. So here's how it starts. My name is Alex. He was referred to me by my brother, and he recently started looking into possibly purchasing a place in Seattle. They use languages like possibly. I'm thinking about it. That's usually how buyers will start their search. He happened to give me some more context. I've been primarily looking at 2-bedroom condos in the SLU, Denny Triangle, Belltown area, but also looking at townhouses in Queen Anne. He says he's in the early process, but he's had a mortgage pre-approval, and I've done some viewing so far, so they've automatically assigned me an agent for it. Again, red flags. If he's done some searching before, he's attended some open houses, or your client is doing this searching process, very, very likely that they have actually been automatically assigned, maybe signed, don't know what they've signed. You'll want to ask more questions. I don't believe I've signed an agency agreement though. And then he says, I think, ... So it's kind of a nice introduction to tonight's call about how to establish agency when you have a client like this. So this would be a good way to respond. Next slide, Shannon. So I responded, and you can take some of my language if it makes sense, but I emailed him back very promptly, and this was my response. My goal was to set up the appointment. You want to establish that appointment as soon as possible so you can ask more questions. So great to hear from you. Brian said you may contact me. That's my brother's name. Yes, I am taking on new clients and would be happy to help you find and negotiate a place in Seattle. That's what I do for a job. I'm very familiar. You want to show that you are strong, that you have relationships, so that you have knowledge about a specific location. And if you do not, you might want to establish a relationship with somebody who does have that type of connection in that particular area. I happen to work that area, so I was comfortable responding in that way. The first step is getting pre-approved. So you're off to a great start. letting that buyer know and feel empowered that they are on the right track. It's always a good thing for a first-time home buyer. However, and this is something you can say as well in your email communication, even though you're pre-approved, I don't want to have you pay for more than what your budget will allow. Have you had a consult with a professional to understand your budget? In this market, the good deals go quick, and you can say this, that was like that in 2 years. It's not like the good deals go quick. The good deals are pretty much gone at this point, but I don't want my clients to overpay. I pride myself in finding great investments and also connecting with your lender so that we work together to put together a winning team. Let me know if you have time tomorrow for a free Zoom consultation. At this appointment, we would go over your questions, understand your wishes, discuss the strategy, and make sure I understand your timeline and budget. All of these things are very relevant to a buyer. I've got some openings at 5:30 or 7 tomorrow or Wednesday at noon. Now, mind you guys, I'm working with you guys pretty much 40 or 50 hours a week, and yet I still found time and was able to catch this lead by having it 2 times, 5:30 and 7 o'clock on a Wednesday or Wednesday at noon. Give him some options. I'll send you a calendar link with my Zoom room number. If that doesn't work, please forward me your pre-approval letter, and I'll at least get started with your lender and send you some introductory material to review. By the way, none of the services will cost you anything. And nowadays we have a buyer agency agreement that you can cost, so you have to watch your language on that last sentence, because sometimes if you're working with a new construction or an off market, they will cost you. It will be a buyer agency agreement. So I would probably rework that last line. But in the case where he's actually looking for market properties, the seller has agreed to pay the commission for that type of representation. So be careful in that last line. But other than that, you want to follow up. Follow up is the key with agency. So we did go ahead and meet with him on Zoom. I actually had Shannon observe the Zoom meeting so she can talk openly about that. Shannon, if you can remember, go ahead and unmute your line. What was that buyer consultation appointment like? Give everybody just kind of a look under the hood. What did that
yeah, so I think initially one of the big things is just having the preparation done. Make sure you are truly a market expert in those areas, especially if you're not as familiar with it. So Rochelle had looked at, in some cases actually even previewed a couple properties in that area for him the day before, or the day, I think he went through some of the units the day before, but you had the listings open that you kind of refreshed right before. And then during the appointment, you had all of the things that you possibly needed or would reference on the screen, but you also had the buyer presentation, the web version, open and ready to kind of, and you didn't go through all of it in detail. You just kind of picked and chose a couple slides to kind of take away for him.
Where would they go? I mean, just kind of talking, you can kind of snap off of the presentation for a second, but where would they go to get a buyer consultation package that's already done? I mean, so they look professional and they have that preparation. Where would they go to get that?
Yeah. So I can actually show you guys. Let me see if I can.
Sorry.
I don't know if I can. Yeah, I don't know if I can. I'll show you at the end though. But it's on our website at bestchoicerealtyhomes.com in the download section, and you can find both the seller and the buyer presentations there that you can have ready on the screen for when you meet with clients. They're also, if you want a printed version, if you know you're meeting your client in person, we have them in all of our offices available for pickup. You're welcome to come by and stop anytime.
Okay, awesome. And then this would be the follow-up. So after we completed the Zoom meeting, we sent him an email. Alex, attached are the Washington required disclosures I'm required to send you by law. Let me know if you have any questions. And I attached that. And also I sent him a DocuSign. And I already told him when we were on the Zoom meeting that I wanted to work with him, and he definitely wanted to work with me. We closed him on the Zoom meeting and he signed the agency agreement right away. He wanted to work with a true professional, and we had won his business. So Shannon got to observe how I handle the buyer agency agreement and how I introduce that. And the best place to do it is after you've consulted with that client, after you've had a formal presentation, after you've met them for coffee, after you maybe have shown them one house just to form that relationship. Maybe it is after you do a you were at a party over the weekend, and then on Monday you wanted to formalize the paperwork. You want to go over the next steps with them. That would be the proper place to introduce a buyer agency agreement. Much like if you did a formal presentation for a seller and you go out to do a listing appointment, at the conclusion of the listing appointment, you will typically have listing paperwork typed, ready to go and filled out so that you can actually get their signature and they can be an exclusive client of yours. That's the same kind of concept or process for working with the buyer. And I think what happens as buyer's agents, and if you're new to the business, is you basically kind of, I hate to say it, labeled as a tour guide or somebody opening the doors. And as I go into the bad and the ugly, you're going to start to see what happened and why it happened when we show that kind of information. But I want to kind of just show you that there is a good way of doing this, and it's not difficult to do. You have to practice it. Some of you that are new to the business may want to practice with a family member. Maybe you want to practice on your raindrop call, or maybe you want to just, set up a time where you practice with me. I'd rather have you introduce a buyer agency agreement and do it well. And all it takes is really just practicing a couple times before you get good at it. It's not difficult, and we have all the materials. You just need to ask for the sale, and you need to put that in front of the client. The risk is that what happens is they end up signing an agreement and then not following through, or worst yet, they never signed, you never introduced it, and they go with another agent. And that's what's happened in the bad or the ugly. Let's go to the next slide, Shan. Let's show what not to do. So with all of the agency agreements going on, we have had agents go ahead and use our agency agreement. I do need you to switch over, Shannon, and pull the buyer agency agreement, because this is it. We should have probably posted that on the next slide. So stop sharing and then show them where to go to get some of the materials. Because there's a lot of, like I said, every day I'm getting questions around agency. And I think it's a lot to do with what's going on in the nation, and then the limited inventory, and then the buyers actually kind of contacting, doing some off market. And then there's just a ton of prospecting that's being done with your clients. So on average, last I heard, an average buyer will speak with 5 different real estate brokers in their search process. And what's unfortunate is some of you are using the agency agreement, and some of you don't even know it exists, or some of you have never used one in your past, and you're resistant to change. And I would beg you to actually look into maybe how do you go about putting this in your business practice? How do you get better at using it in your business? So you can definitely go to our downloads, where Shannon said, go click on downloads right there. Thank you. And then right in the resources, you'll see we have our agency agreement right there. So you can download it. It has been updated as of 2021. There actually was no changes when we reviewed all of our documentation. And our attorney likes this one better than the Northwest MLS. In fact, we are trying to collect on 2 of those agency agreements. 2 of our buyers have signed this agreement with our buyer's agent. So it was good up until the point when the buyer basically signed the agreement, and then for whatever reason, they found an off-market property, they went to an open house, they knew that they signed this agreement. We know that because we have proof of it, and there's a copy that they were given. So that's another important point. They must have a copy of what they've signed. If you're using AuthentiSign, they have a copy of it, and they have signed it right below here. I need you guys to do a better job, though, if you're using the buyer agency agreement. On the very second page, Shannon, if you could scroll down, all of the first parts filled out, they need to initial the bottom, but they also need to select on the last page. Please also have them indicate their address. That's where we will serve them the document that is prepared by our attorney to actually collect on the commission that they promised to pay here. If the address is not filled out, it makes it harder for us to go about the process of trying to collect. Nonetheless, it's still a binding agreement, and we will go about it. But this is sometimes is kind of sloppily filled out. Luckily for our agreement here, it needs to be signed, and you need to sign it as well as the broker. If you want me to sign it because it makes it look like they'd have to contact me to actually cancel the contract, I'm happy to sign any of the agreements that you put in front of me. You can send them to me through AuthentiSign or DocuSign, and I'll sign it right away. So you have a binding agreement with your buyer. So in essence, they would have to contact me to cancel an agency agreement with our firm. And this contract, it has been vetted, it has been reviewed by 3 attorneys, and is deemed that it is suitable to collect on a commission. The only part when you look at this agreement that is still being debated is really the scope of services. And it says the scope of services and the area. That is currently being debated from a Washington state vantage point. You probably have seen some things prepared by the Washington Association of Realtors, or listen to Annie Fitzsimmons. Some of those kind of conversations are being had right now on whether we have the service capacity, whether Best Choice Realty can service a client that's looking in Spokane while also looking in Seattle, for example. That I will make the claim that that is something that Best Choice Realty can handle with what we've accomplished and having branches and independent offices that our brokers can work with. And the brokerage agreement is with Best Choice Realty, not with specifically, we could appoint, say, Shannon Hall to represent Best Choice Realty, but the agreement is actually with our company, with our firm. And I have made the claim that we have the ability to represent clients all across the state of Washington. So then the bad becomes, okay, we had a little situation where buyer did sign the buyer agency agreement on 2 occasions. They're currently being sent out in process right now, where Best Choice Realty, this is the sample letter that our attorney put together. Please be advised, this goes out to the buyer and to potentially that buyer's agent that stole that client from you. Please be advised, this firm represents Best Choice Realty. It's come to my client's attention that blank have entered into a purchase and sale agreement to purchase the property located at whatever. The purpose of this letter is to notify that there was an exclusive buyer agency agreement that was done on February 7th. So again, that was just last month, which is enclosed for reference. We include a copy of that agreement granting Best Choice Realty to represent that client and promising to pay Best Choice Realty a specific commission amount. And then it attempts to collect. Basically, please contact our attorney to collect and work out a deal. Most of these, if not all, there's only been a few cases where they've gone to trial. Most of the cases that are buyer agency agreement or where we represent, they get settled. You may not get a full 3%. You might get 5,000, you might get 10,000, you might get 7,000. Whatever the reason may be, most of them get settled or mediated before they actually go to a judge. So this is the first step of a process of collection, and it does take several months. It's not like something where you're going to get paid, or there is a chance that they could make a counter claim saying that Shannon didn't actually do the formal presentation and they never showed a property and they did not know the area of Seattle or downtown. And so then it becomes a he said, she said kind of situation. So in my good situation, it can turn bad. And state of Washington, unfortunately, hasn't really set a precedence. They do have an ethics hearing that they could do if you were a realtor, where in a bad situation where we could go to, say, another realtor to realtor member and basically say, you stole my client from me, and so therefore pay us a commission. But the Northwest MLS is independently owned and operated. It's not operated by the Realtor Association. And if you did have a written agreement like this one, the MLS could intervene and try to attempt to help you in collecting. But really, it's meant to mediate more than to get you paid. So it's super helpful. You have an agency agreement, and because what could happen is the ugly, and this is unfortunate. So let's go to the next slide, Shan. The ugly can happen, and this is with a friend. So I'm going to just kind of go through the slides pretty quickly, and then to summarize what happened with the ugly. No buyer agency agreement was introduced, and one of our brokers lost commission to about $40,000 to $50,000. And it did not take that much. I think what happened is when I spent some time with my attorney going through this, our broker thought that there might be a procuring cause situation because there was a lot of information that was provided to this client. And this client knew what the process was like, but unfortunately there was no agency agreement, and therefore our attorney unfortunately can't go after the buyer and say, we were the procuring cause of the sale because there was exchanges that went above and beyond this. So when I sat down, I'm like, how can this be? My attorney said, we've got to be very careful in how we look at text message communication. Did this agent formally show the house? Yes, the client. In fact, we did. We actually have proof that they actually, our broker actually toured the home with our client. So that was good. But the problem that we have is there's nothing in writing. Verbal, which would be text messages, are not really something that the courts have deemed as, confirming that that client was, actually communicating, working officially with our broker. Text messaging is still communicating. It could be seen as friend-to-friend communication, not an agency established relationship that actually holds that agreement or holds that agency together. So this is how it went. Babe, is that venue still available? I mean, if you're on a Babe level, I would think that you'd want to actually, this agent probably thought, okay, I'm assuming the relationship. I don't need to put an agency agreement together. So things like that, even though they're friends, even though they're family members, you still probably want to get in the habit of putting an agency agreement and introducing that early on in the conversation. Yes, it is. Our agent says, did he lower it? So then our agent says, no, last time he lowered it, it was on the 3rd of September. So then we have kind of like a screenshot of HomeSnap, which is great. This agent's using HomeSnap and is using to communicate with their agent in that way. Okay, stop what you're doing. And then we got all of these kind of properties that are being sent via text. Let's go to the next slide. Let me see. This is after they're having some verbal conversation. Obviously, there's nothing that is true comparable. The buyer's asking for our agent to do some market analysis to understand what price they should pay. But it's around $450 a square foot. There's $4,505 in the square foot in the house. And you figure the 2 garages in the business. So what do you think it comes out to? This client says. And then she puts on there $2,027,250. You guys can do the math on what a 3% commission is. That's a lot of money. Now, I'm not saying that our broker did a bad job. I'm just saying that when you start to talk about comparables, research, showings, this type of text messaging, God, I better hope that we have a buyer agency agreement, because then I can actually go to bat for you and try to get involved when this buyer decides to maybe use somebody else. Well, I have to talk to you. And then this was, again, we took it off from text messaging. Now we're actually into Facebook Messenger, right? So this is the middle section of the slide. So the client says, well, I have to talk to you. And our agent says, are you okay? I am. I just hope you still love me, I think is what she meant to say, after I talk to you. Uh-oh, what happened? I'm scared to tell you. What? Okay, so you're scaring me. This is definitely ugly. Please don't be mad at me. Okay. I know we work with you as an agent and I love you as a person, but we had a difficult situation where we had to do a 1031 exchange and get the heck out of King County. Oh no, so you sold your houses? I know you weren't really knowledgeable on that. And I had to list 3 potential properties on the exchange. That's how it works. One of them was in Snohomish venue. Please don't be mad, please. So again, that shows you that clients will start their search in King County. They may go to Pierce County. They may go to Snohomish. They even might go to Spokane. But one thing that you want to make very clear to your brokers and make clear to your clients when you're talking to them about your brokerage, the brokerage you work for, is that we can represent clients in all over the state now. We have agents and brokers that certainly are experienced and familiar. In fact, your broker has flown out to Spokane on multiple occasions to assist the process of negotiating some deals and negotiating some properties and working with 1031 exchanges. I don't think that was conveyed early on in the process. Certainly there wasn't a formal buyer consultation that was done. And there was definitely not a buyer agency agreement made between the 2 clients because they thought that they were friends, like they could do a deal together. So wait, you had to put an offer on that listing? Well, we had to do it and we had to do 3. I don't understand, our agent says. How come you didn't use me? I showed you that property. I took the time to do that. Let's go to the next slide. I was the person, our agent still communicating, I was the person who showed you that listing. Legally, that should be my commission. Wow. So then they posted the actual listing I couldn't have done the process. It was so difficult. The client says, that's BS, and you know that. So it becomes a little bit more, I didn't even include all of the text messages between the parties, but it was nothing that a normal agent would do. I've been an agent for years. Again, she's listing out all of these typical objections that probably should have been done or handled in the beginning or in the onset of that conversation. Have you worked with any agents? Would you need some help with listing your properties? How are you going to structure the financing? Some of these kind of questions probably should have been asked. It's always easy to go back in time, and it gives you that sick feeling. And I've personally had this happen to me, not at this price point. It's extremely upsetting for our broker, who lost a lot of commission for her family and for the time that she spent. She worked with this client for over a year. And what's even much more sickening is if this broker would have been a Realtor member, I probably could have contacted her broker and had a very good, frank conversation with the designated broker and negotiated in such a way where we could have been paid some of the commission or negotiate a referral. But unfortunately, this designated broker is not somebody that's honorable designated broker that actually was the buyer's agent that wrote this contract and in essence stole the client away from us. Unfortunately, we operate in an independently owned and operated MLS where it's not difficult, it's not easy for me to go to bat and deal with commission disputes in this way. Does this agent have a right to the commission? Our attorney looked at this entire text message thread and the email communication and the situation in general, and there is no precedent for us to really go at it. When other buyer's agent established agency and put an agency agreement in front of her client and did show and negotiate a purchase and sale agreement and did close on transaction. There was nothing that we could do on this one. And it was unfortunate that it was the ugly one to share tonight. I'm actually fortunate that we are in process with the good and the bad. We actually had agency and we had success in those types of arrangements, but with the ugly, where it's all just text message and no agreement has been established and no formal relationship established, it's all kind of an assumed relationship because you got him in touch with the lender, you got him in touch with the house, you showed the property. She was potentially the procuring cause of the sale, but there was a break in that procuring cause of the sale. There was a break when that client decided that our broker did not have knowledge to be able to handle or experience to handle the 1031 exchange and listed and sold with another broker. So unfortunately, I have to end at 6 o'clock with that note. I'd love to get any questions that you guys have about the process or an instance that you may have experienced that maybe was good, bad, or ugly to share with the group. So I will go ahead and open up the call at this time for any comments, questions, or ideas you want to share. Ben, do you have?
Yes, Rachel. On open house, let's say, for example, a buyer came and she really loves the house. She said, I love this. Want to make an offer. So I asked the client, buyer, do you have a broker? Are you working with a broker? If she said yes, two things, right? If she said yes, should I ask her, do you have a written agency buyer agreement?
Yes.
And if not, if she said no, could I write the offer for this buyer? Or what happened then?
Yes, you can, Ben. That's a great example, and I'm glad you brought that up. So yes, I want you to do a better job. If you're doing an open house, not just ask them if they're working with another broker, have they signed with another broker? Have they signed an agency agreement? Because if they're not signed with an agency agreement, they're not obligated to use that agent for that deal. And they might have liked Ben when Ben was actually showing the property and giving them insight about the neighborhood. And I know Ben does a great job on his open houses. So they might be more comfortable working with Ben than they would be with somebody else that they just talked to or texted with, right? Then you could establish agency at that point in time. And you should, if they are going to, let's say you are the buyer's agent representing an open house, you should establish agency. When somebody says, yes, I want to write that up, you should establish agency at that point. And they want you to represent them in that purchase and sale. Maybe it's with David Sturm's listing. David has got the listing, but you're the buyer's agent. you need to establish agency anyways because of the potential dual agency that could be had by having that type of relationship exist. So I love that you brought that up, Ben. I certainly would ask more questions about what they have signed. There's no harm in asking them to provide a copy of what they signed too, so that you know that they truly have an agency relationship before you continue to give them information and education and knowledge about the property. So love that you brought that up. Do you think that will be difficult?
Yeah, but if the buyer said, yeah, I signed with the broker, we have an agreement, that's the end of it.
That's the end of it. That's right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
got
and
it.
you shouldn't share anything more. I mean, at that point, you're just assisting that listing agent at that point, right? You have no agency duties to that buyer at all. So, that's where it ends, unfortunately, on that one. So
Okay,
great.
yeah.
And we had another question from Serena. What if the buyer is willing to go in an agent relationship with you, but refuses to sign the buyer agency agreement because the buyer knows that a friend of theirs successfully bought a house without having signed an agreement?
They're willing to go into if they're willing to go into an agency relationship, then I guess I don't understand why they wouldn't sign. They were wanting to. So an agency is established at the moment you write the offer. So I think maybe that's what Serena is referring to. They're willing to write an offer with you, but they're not willing to establish agency. I'm confused by the question, Shannon. Maybe you can dissect it a little bit for me.
Yeah. It looks like they're willing. I would think they're willing to work with you, show homes, write offers, but they just don't want to sign an agreement. They don't want to sign paperwork.
So
my question is because my friend knows that I don't have a license yet, but a lot of my friends they don't want to sign an agreement because he knows that his friend or her friend did not sign an agreement because that becomes a trend.
Okay, I see. The non-exclusive versus the exclusive. Thank you, Stephen. Yeah, so there is an agreement that you can introduce on the MLS, Serena. It's an agency or a non-exclusive. I would say that it's an objection that buyer is throwing at you, by not signing something because a friend of theirs didn't sign an agreement. You've got to be prepared to handle that objection and ask another question. Ben, would it be silly for me to represent you without a legally binding representation agreement? That's a great one. Ben Davidson, nicely done. Ask another question. And you explain, you might have to explain more of your value proposition and what you can do and why you're having them sign the agreement, Serena, because there's a lot of properties that are on market or off market. And this agreement allows me to represent you for all different types of sales, not just the listed homes that you see on the MLS. I have to work hard to get other opportunities brought to your attention. And so by you signing this agreement, it allows me to represent you for any type of purchase. And I understand that maybe your friend only looked at on-market properties, but we want to open ourselves to all types of properties at Best Choice Realty. So you might want to kind of work out like how you would respond to that, because it will come up. If it's come up for Serena, I'm sure it's coming up with other people too. Because in Washington, it has not been common up until probably 3 or 4 years ago. It was not common to put a buyer agency agreement in front of a buyer. And now, because of the way commission is transparent on all of the websites now, all of a sudden we're now starting to see our buyer agency being challenged. And so I like Ben's idea is just respond with, wouldn't it be silly for me to represent you without having a legally binding agreement? Because there's all kinds of different situations and all kinds of different paperwork and properties out there. And by having a buyer agent, we can navigate that process with you rather than having you, talk to this person or talk to that person. You have somebody that can represent you and negotiate on your best, with your best mind in gosh, it's a long day today, with your best mind in front of you. Great job, Ben, on answering that. Anybody else have ways that they would handle it? Aria? Okay, I've been working with a buyer for over a year showing homes. Port Townsend commuting, yep. Recently, they've stopped answering my communications. No exclusive agency, so is there anything I can do moving forward if they have just stopped contacting me? If they have contacted you and say, we worked unfortunately, Ari, you might get the text or the email, just like our ugly, saying, unfortunately, we've decided to go a different direction. So you might want to be a bit more direct in your communication if they've gone off the, they have not responded. You might want to just ask them, are they working with another, kind of back it up? Are they working with another agent? If they say, yes, I'm working with this other agent, then you kind of have to go, have you signed anything with that other agent? Yes, we made an offer on that house, but we're not happy with that process. You might be able to reintroduce the buyer agency, Aria, but you might have to ask more questions and just step into the punch is what I call it. Just step into it and just, you might get slugged a little bit, but it'd be better than you going over and doing any more showings or trying to think that you're going to get paid on the commission when in reality they've gone a different direction altogether. So
just maybe be more direct and just text them and say, are you working with someone else? Or are you still wanting me to show for you or keep looking for you or something like that?
Yeah, just be very direct and just ask the questions, Aria. I mean, you have nothing to lose. I would say just go ahead and just, I'm consistently looking for properties for you. Would you like me to continue doing so? Just really yes or no questions, yes or no, right? And then it's kind of closing that off, but getting them to respond. You need the response one way or the other.
Yeah, okay.
Yep,
So
Ben?
is it true to say then that unless the buyer had a written agency buyer agreement, this buyer is any agent's buyer, right? I mean, right? Is that true to say that?
Aria's assuming that the Aria situation where she's showing them properties over in Fort Townsend, it's assumed that would be a relationship, but nothing's in writing. So if her client had written, maybe they went to an open house and wrote an offer, that agency agreement, if they did not have a buyer agency agreement, that agency would be established for that contract alone. Unless they sign an agency agreement, which many firms are introducing. Coldwell Banker has introduced one, Keller Williams has introduced one. Many brokerages have introduced buyer agency agreements. We're not the only one. So if they had signed an agency agreement when they wrote the offer, that could have been, or maybe it's just for that agency was established for only that property in Port Townsend. Again, we're making a lot of assumptions here to kind of answer your question, Ben, but if they have not signed an agency agreement, Aria could represent them on another property if they have not signed something in writing, an actual agency agreement. Maybe it was only for that Port Townsend, they lost that deal. She could take that client back. Does that make sense? If there was not an agency agreement established.
And they actually they haven't put any offers in. They just pre-inspected the homes and then decided no on all of them. And they also live in another state. So, but I mean, it doesn't matter. I mean, right? Because exclusive agency is, even if they live in another state, it's going to bind, right?
Right. Yep. They sign an agency agreement. And most states too, you guys, they actually have agency established. They have agency agreements. State of Idaho, make sure that you have agency established, and you have, given Utah, for example, it's a requirement before you even show properties to have established an agency agreement that's the state law. So there's various states that have different laws surrounding agency. To Deanna's points, new developing situation, out-of-state agents still licensed in Washington, yes. And they're encouraging their buyers to use new agents for showings. Yeah, it's clarifying agency is going to be really the hot topic over the next year. And I've got my attorney on speed dial right now for these type of situations because I'm experiencing such a high volume of issues and complaints. And this is my client, that was my client, I showed them properties. It doesn't really matter. We need to start getting better at the buyer agency agreement. So that's what I can tell you as far as that goes. And let the attorneys hash it out on who signed what when type of thing. Perfect.
I have question. I have a client from Korea, and he's looking for a house in Bellevue, and he never been here. So he asked me a lot of questions, and I answer and introduce about this area and everything.
Okay.
But he want to come over, maybe roommate or rented for a while, and then buy a house. The situation still, do I need to get agreement, the agency agreement, or?
I would say
How can do it?
definitely, I mean, you can certainly introduce a consultation. You're even in your, if he speaks only Korean, you can have a great consultation. We're in the process of getting the buyer consultation in Korean language for you. So it makes it easy for you to send that and also have them sign something. There's no harm in getting them to sign. I think the problem, Jean, is that some people introduce the buyer agency too early. Establish a relationship, make sure that that relationship is tight. And then say, in order to make this official, so I can actually go and do some touring and doing some research for you, I need your agreement to represent you. And then at that point, have him sign. And you can do that when you're still conversing before you do a lot of work, or you can, at a minimum, when you sign an agreement with them, like when you're actually putting your first offer in, put that buyer agency agreement into the mix, right? So you're establishing agency when you're writing the offer. For if he doesn't get this property, right, you want the opportunity to represent him on another property, correct? So at a minimum, at least do it at time of offer, but certainly there's no harm in doing it. In fact, it's highly regarded if you can do it earlier, Jean. If you can actually get his signature on that earlier, that would be better, because he might be talking to other people, right? Or he's on the blog and he's like talking with some other agent, and this agent's offering me some of her commission. All of that stuff, that conversation becomes, off the table when you've established agency and you've established your worth as an agent for that client. Sooner the better. Gosh, Shannon, I've opened up a can of worms, huh?
I know. Stephanie, I think, had the first one that came up next, had a signed buyer agency agreement with the client last year, submitted an offer, and then he's basically ghosting her. What can she do?
Step into the punch. There's no harm. It's like, I'd rather know about that now than go spinning my wheels or think that I'm going to be working with the client. Let's just reintroduce the conversation. Go back. Can I get on your calendar to do another, to talk about some of the properties that we saw last year and see if there's something that might work for you. Go back and in essence we used to call it back in the day, just like a come to Jesus, right? Where you actually go ahead and have a buyer consultation. You might have messed up before by not doing a consultation, but there's no harm in basically getting the parties to the table again and consulting with them.
Reconsulting.
Yeah, just reconsulting, and then having more communication about what you're going to do to help them actually get the deal accepted, and just be very, very upfront and kind of candid about what's the state of the affairs. It's a very hot time, and there's most of the deals that you're finding, we have like just an increase of 20% right now. 20 to 30% are off-market transactions we're seeing at Best Choice Realty. With that kind of increase, that also you can use that as a way to say, I know I want to do the best for you. Your deal might not be on market, and in order for me to represent you, I need to establish an agency agreement between my firm and you, so that I can bring these things to your attention. I can't do that without an agreement to represent you.
Yeah, and we've got two more that popped up that are fairly similar from Katisha and Carl. But in essence, if their client is already working with an agent and they sign another buyer agency agreement with our agent, basically yourself, what do you do in that situation? It's awkward, but what do you do?
Yeah, and that's where unfortunately people are signing stuff they don't even know what they're signing. So that goes for a lot of clients out there. They're using Authentisign and DocuSign and not really reading what they sign. But in Katisha's situation, if someone has already signed an agreement with another agent, you might be in a situation where we might actually have to split. We've had that situation happen before, Katisha, where a brokerage, Keller Williams, for example, and Best Choice Realty, we've had it happen actually twice in the last 2 years, where we basically split the commission that was earned on that particular transaction in half. So in essence, Best Choice Realty didn't earn the full 3%. We settled the agreement, and basically Keller Williams made 1.5, we made 1.5. The client was happy because they didn't have to come up with additional funds, because it all got worked out. The seller had already agreed in that instance to pay the commission. But we're finding, Katisha, that there are situations out there where there is zero commission, or the builder is not offering a commission. And so in those cases, it's extremely important that you have that conversation with your buyer in case that was to happen. How much would they be paying for your services? Because it's not always clear cut. So Katisha, yes, that has happened a couple times. Shannon, was there somebody else I missed?
No. Carl had a similar question, but I think that kind of answers that. So I think that's, unless someone else had a question they want to pipe in, that's all we're at.
Yeah, and it's anytime you have a situation where you're like unsure, you need me to contact the other designated broker, you know, all I need to know is, I don't want you to, what we don't want to get is in a reputation problem, right? Where we actually, somebody says, I've signed with another agent, you find out it's with Keller Williams, and then you introduce another, and you're trying to steal. That's not good. That's soliciting another client from somebody else. So, or to say to them, you have to cancel your agreement before I'll work with you. You should not be soliciting in that way, right? Where you're saying, cancel your listing or cancel your buyer's agency agreement with Keller Williams, and then I will get you to sign a buyer agency agreement. That's a total no-no as well. You cannot advise them. On record though, a client, if they've signed an agency agreement with Keller Williams, for example, or with whatever broker they've signed with Best Choice Realty, they would have to contact the designated broker in essence to vet out their claims. Say, Rochelle, I'm not happy with my broker that you've assigned. This agreement is with Best Choice Realty, and therefore I want to cancel my buyer agency agreement with your firm. I would have to hear what they had to say. My broker didn't know how to do 1031 exchanges. My broker didn't showed up late. My broker didn't, you know, X, Y, and Z. And I'd have to say, you know what? I have to make a call, and it's a hard call, but I would say I'm willing to cancel your buyer agency or your buyer agency or buyer brokerage agreement with our broker and with our brokerage. So it is at the discretion of that designated broker on whether they're willing to let that client out of the contract. And it would have to be pretty extreme for me to say that we have not earned our commission. I know you guys work very hard for your commission, especially as a buyer's agent right now, when you're having to write multiple offers, when you're having to negotiate, you're having to do cover letters, you're having to vet out your financing, you're having to do all of this work. And in the case of the ugly situation with our broker there, I mean, providing comparables, doing CMAs, calling the listing agent, contacting the lender, following up with the lender. There's so much work that goes into representing a buyer in this marketplace that I know you guys earn your commission. It's very unfortunate when I go into battle and I don't have an agreement to even, you know, go to my attorney and say, how can I get this agent commission? And she looks at me and goes, Rochelle, there's nothing I can do on this one. Unfortunately, there is no agency agreement. There is nothing in writing. It just looks like it's a family or friend communicating by text. It's super, super important that you guys work on introducing this into your business. Any other questions, Shannon, before we wrap?
No, I think we're good.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll let you guys go, and more to come. We'll cover some buyer consultation, actually what to say, probably deal with some more of some conflict resolution as well in the future. I know this is not going away, so I appreciate your input. And thank you for those of you that chatted. That was very helpful.